Thank you so much for being with us. Good morning.
My pleasure. Good morning.
When is Robert Mueller going to testify before your committee?
Well, we hope very soon. It will not happen this week, according to the chairman, but the committee is still in conversations with Mr. Mueller's team, and we hope he will come before the committee. We all think it's very important that the American people hear directly from him, as well as our committee, so he can walk the American people through the contents of the Mueller report, explain the judgments and decisions he's made, explain the evidence he collected during this investigation. So we hope it will happen very soon.
I don't understand, and I don't think the American people understand what the holdup is here. How does this work? Does the Judiciary Chair call Robert Mueller and say, you know, Mr. Mueller, we'd like to see you before our committee. Can you make it on this day? And Mueller either says yes or no. I mean, what's going on with these negotiations?
Well, I mean, that's what happens originally. You know, initially you ask witnesses, particularly administration witnesses, to come to the committee voluntarily. That's always been the tradition, that witnesses just come, you agree on a date, you work out the date, and they arrive. It's a little different with the Trump administration, where the president has first said, you know, Mr. Barr would decide whether it's appropriate for the special counsel to come. Then he said he didn't care. Then he said he shouldn't come. Now he's back to it's up to the Attorney General. So I think there's been some confusion from the president. But, you know, obviously if a witness doesn't come voluntarily, the committee has the ability to issue a and we would do that with the special counsel. I think it's everyone's hope that he'll come voluntarily and we'll be able to work out a date.
So just to be clear, is Mueller not coming voluntarily yet?
No, I don't think it's fair to say that yet. There are ongoing discussions between the committee and Mr. Mueller, and there just hasn't been an agreement reached with respect to his testimony or a date, but I think everyone expects and hopes that he will come before the committee.
Is the Attorney General getting in the way of this happening right now?
You know, it's unclear. The Attorney General has said under oath that he has no objection to the special counsel appearing, so I hope the Attorney General will not interfere with this.
It's just confusing about why we can't figure out if there's a date when it will happen. I understand it may not be able to happen for a few weeks, but one might think you would at least be able to say it's going to happen on X date. But let me move on here. What I want to know, and I think what people are curious about, is what are Democrats going to do? We put up this list of investigations, some 20 investigations, and they're all different. But on some of them, the White House is just flat out stonewalling, saying we are not going to provide the documents. We are not going to provide the witnesses. The House has already held, or the committee has already held, certain people in contempt, including the Attorney General. So I want to know what the Democrats, what you all are going to do about it. How far will you push? It's one thing to say you're in contempt. It's another thing to enforce it.
Well, I think there's no question that people should understand that Congress's oversight and investigation responsibility is really dependent on our ability to collect evidence and to compel the attendance of witnesses to testify under oath. So if the executive branch is permitted to extinguish that, it will essentially extinguish congressional oversight, which is obviously what our Constitution compels us to do as members of Congress. So I expect that we will use all the tools at our resources, including authorizing civil contempt proceedings to hold the Attorney General or any witness who doesn't appear accountable. That can include the imposition of fines. We also have inherent contempt power. But look, we want to make sure we get the witnesses and the evidence we need to do our jobs. And I think the committees are prepared to do everything that we can and to use all of the tools at our disposal to compel the attendance of witnesses and the production of documents. We should remember some of these oversight hearings are about the child separation policy, about giving security clearances to people who shouldn't have gotten them, about improper influence at the VA, so it's deteriorating the condition that our veterans are confronting. So these are serious, serious issues.
You use the phrase inherent contempt. Now, you're a lawyer. Yes. Can you explain to our viewers what that means?
Sure. So the Supreme Court of the United States recognized in a case in 1821 and again in 1935 that Congress has the authority inherently to adjudge people in contempt who defy a subpoena. And in both those cases, not only allowed the Congress to hold someone in contempt, but allowed Congress to take them into custody until they complied with the subpoena, which, by the way, is routinely done in courts all across America. So the idea is a subpoena is a lawful order to appear, and you can't just ignore it. So Congress also has the inherent authority to enforce its subpoena that way. I think everyone hopes it will not get to that. But I, for one, am very committed to making certain we get the evidence and the testimony we need to do our job properly, to make informed judgments, and to be sure that we have access to the information we need to make those judgments.
So you won't rule out inherent contempt, which inherently includes possible jail time.
Yeah, I mean, it will be obviously the decision of the chairman, but I will advocate, I've already advocated for that. Look, I think we have to be serious about this effort to collect evidence. It cannot be the case that witnesses who are served with a lawful subpoena can just ignore them. And I think it's important that, again, this is a stonewalling not just of Congress, but of the American people, of their right to know the truth, to demonstrate that no one is above the law. And I don't think we should rule out anything.
One of the things that Nancy Pelosi has said is she feels as if the president is goading the Democrats into impeachment. If that's the case, then do you need to be careful about giving him what he wants?
Yeah, I think we have to be careful because, look, we got elected to act on an agenda for the people of this country that focused on driving down healthcare costs, driving down the cost of prescription drugs, rebuilding the infrastructure of America and raising family incomes, and taking on the corruption in Washington and the self-dealing. And we've moved forward very aggressively on all of those issues. We've passed legislation in all of those areas already, or will be about to. So we have to stay very focused on delivering results for the American people. They also elected us to hold this president and this administration accountable, and we need to do responsible oversight. And I think we have to make informed judgments. And I think, as the Speaker said, we should never proceed with impeachment for a political reason. We should never avoid it for a political reason. We should follow the facts where they take us. But we've got to do our oversight and to hold this administration accountable.
I want you to take off your judiciary hat and put on your House Foreign Affairs hat, if you will. The United States, tensions seem to be escalating with Iran. The Secretary of State canceled a trip to Moscow. He's in Brussels talking to European leaders. One of the things the administration has said is that there is intelligence which points to Iran making plans to attack U.S. interests in the Gulf region. Have you been given any intelligence? Have you been briefed on what information is out there?
We have not been, or at least I have not been. I think this is very alarming, the change of Secretary Pompeo's trip. We should remember that part of the reason that apparently this change was made because the Secretary wants to speak with the Europeans about Iran's claims to no longer abide by the terms of the JCPOA, the Iran deal. We're in a sort of awkward position because we broke our participation in that deal. The Europeans have remained in it, and they have an interest in ensuring that the inspections and the limitations that were placed in the Iran deal remain in place. So we're in sort of a tough when we're arguing that Iran has broken the deal when we walked away from it, but we're meeting with our European allies to try to fortify their enforcement of it, apparently. So I think this is confusing. This is a dangerous situation. What we want to do is obviously avoid a military engagement. I think the American people do not want another protracted war. So, but this is a very dangerous situation. Iran has engaged in very maligned activities in the region and getting worse. So I think this is something to be very concerned about.
Do you think the United States, the Trump administration, is inflaming those tensions?
Look, I think walking away from the Iran deal was a mistake. I think some of the language the president has been using is not helpful, but I think Iran is responsible for its own bad behavior and something that we need to confront in a serious way. In the region, working with our allies, I think that was one of the advantages of the Iran deal, that once we prevented them from developing a nuclear weapon, we could push back on them in other ways in the region. So, we know the problem is the president is also surrounded by lots of people who advocated for the Iraq war. So I think there's a lot of reason to be concerned about the advice he's getting.
Congressman David Cicilline.